Hello and welcome, everybody. Tonight we have Kamon Reynolds here to talk about spring beekeeping. He's been keeping bees in Tennessee for 22 years now, a commercial beekeeper for many of those. He's also the founder of the Bee Expo, the largest bee conference in the world, I believe. You can correct me on that, but we'll be discussing splits, feeding, pollen patties, swarms, and queen rearing. And at the end, we might talk a little bit about the Bee Expo and future plans with that. Kamon, can you tell us in a few minutes how you started beekeeping and how you got to today?
Well, I was already into agriculture as a young man. I really was trying to raise a bunch of chickens around 12 and 13 and was doing farmers markets around 14. And so I wanted to have more products, and honey made a lot of sense. It wasn't like my tomatoes and the onions and other things that I was growing where you only might have it a certain time of the season and then it might be very perishable. And honey kept in a jar, and people really wanted it too, and there wasn't a lot of it. So how hard could it be? And here we are, and if I'd have known how hard it was, maybe I wouldn't have ever started. But there was a gentleman and his wife that had about a dozen hives, and they showed me an observation hive. And so that's what really got me into it, was just seeing all of those bees working in the observation hive. I'd seen it one other time at Fall Creek Falls and just thought that was cool. But after tasting real honey for the first time at age 14, I knew I needed to get some bees. And so promptly a couple of months later, I purchased 5 hives from a guy. Bad way to get into bees. I had 5 hives before I had a bee suit, and got my dad stung up in the process of moving them. This is what kids do to their parents, and I guess it's payback for what they did to theirs. But that's kind of how I got into it. I lost most of the hives the first year. I didn't know anything about mites. So a lot of the people who get online and post things that are ignorant and people jump on them, if people knew how I started, I would be the one people would be jumping on, so to speak. And so I think that's why what I've done's resonated with a lot of folks, is because a lot of us don't start off the best way. We hope that people will start the best way. But I struggled a lot early on, and I want to see people be successful at this because it's a lot of fun. The community of people is wonderful. There's just awesome people in beekeeping. No matter where I go, just got back from Wisconsin. They're awesome up there. A little cold for me, but probably about normal for you.
Well, no, actually it's warm compared to there. They're weeks ahead of us.
Oh, weeks ahead of us. Well, show off. So,
Not to brag, but
they do have way better cheese than you guys have in Maine, but they don't have any lobster.
We have way better blueberries than they do. So,
nobody's perfect. So that's kind of how I got started and got into bees. And the expo that we run, my wife and I, it's probably the second largest. It's hard to know. There's several conferences in Europe, in the Asia area, like Eurasia, so to speak, if that's a term still used. And a lot of them are not English speaking, and so we don't communicate well with them, so we don't know all the stuff that they do. But it's definitely the largest in North America and one of the largest in the world. And some conferences are different than the other. One of the biggest ones that I'm aware of, which is bigger than ours, is Appomondia, and they're a little bit of a different conference than we are, but also a good one. I've never been, heard a lot of good things, so I would like to go. As the beekeeper in me definitely enjoys going to really well-ran events. It doesn't really matter how big they are. I've spoke at a lot of places, and if it's really well-ran, there could be 200 people there, and it'd just be an awesome event. So I really think we need to change how we do some of the stuff that we do. But that's a whole nother topic.
it is. You always have a way of getting into whole other topics, but that's part of your charm, I suppose. So Kamon, it's early. Well, not early March anymore. It's late March now, and I'm assuming you're starting splitting, or you have been over the past couple of weeks, or in the next couple of weeks. So, just give us a breakdown of some of the ways that you do splits. I know there's probably a pretty high degree of change or difference between your different ways you do it, but just let us, fill us in on some stuff that you do.
All right, there's a few different types of splits that I really like. One of the talks that I give, and one of my favorites to give, is 7 ways to split bees. And that's an hour-long presentation. We won't do that. But right now, today was the first day I've seen some of my mated queens come back and be laying. So that's always a fun part of the season. Thanks for bringing that slide up. And that's exactly what box they're in right now, is the Jester Easy Nuke boxes. And we have queens that have gone out and come back, and they don't have calf brood yet, but they really need to lay really well to build it up to a 5-frame nuke size. And so we're here at the end of March. We typically sell our nukes the 3rd or 4th week of April. In a really bad year, maybe the 1st week of April. And so our nucleus colonies, they have to build the colony themselves. It's not like, okay, here's a big split, we're going to buy a queen, plug that queen in. These queens have to prove themselves by being able to pick themselves off of a small split and into a strong 5-frame nucleus colony. So how we make those this time of the year is we will take one really good frame of brood, a frame that's probably partial brood, mostly food, another frame of food, and 2 frames of foundation. Sometimes, as you can see with that nucleus colony, there's 3 frames of foundation likely. That one was getting too big, and we pulled out a frame of food, dropped in another foundation. Typically, our nukes will have either 2 brand new combs or 3 brand new combs, and the other combs will likely be under 4 years old as well. So young combs are important, but when we're making those splits up, we have that one good frame of brood, maybe another partial, and you can throw 2 frames in there. We're trying to be conservative because we're making a bunch. We need to make as many nukes as we can to sell. But for the hobby beekeeper that maybe have more that they can afford to give, well, there's nothing wrong with 2 frames of brood, 3 frames of brood. The most important thing, though, for splits this time of the year isn't so much frames of brood, but food contact, plenty of it, and plenty of bees to keep that brood warm. What happens if we drop down to 25 degrees next week? It's very possible for us to do that. It's also possible for us to be 80 degrees next week, too. And those early splits, especially in a nuke box like that with almost no thermal properties, they need to have extra bee power to keep the brood warm and also to be able to keep the brood warm during the peak of the day and send excess foragers out for pollen and resources. And so that extra shake or 2 of bees in there is very important. So that's the splits that we have now. The queens are coming back, and they're going to build up to where they need to be. My other favorite split is just a chop split, break it down in half. After the flow's over, I mean, immediately, as soon as possible, we are going to take these strong colonies that are probably about 3 deeps of bees. They're honey production size colonies, and we are taking all the supers all the way down, and we're going to leave them in a double deep. I run single brood management. I'll try to keep this quick, but we have all these honey supers on top, and we cut it all the way to the bottom single. There's an excluder right there, and so now we have about 3 deeps worth of bees and 1 deep box, and there's hardly any food for them, but there's also all these older bees and more bees on the way. The bees have grown to this massive population based off of the natural forage, but once we hit the dearth period, when the flow's over, that's naturally going to decline. So why not utilize this strong population off of the honey flow and draw some foundations, draw some combs out, and we are going to immediately pull the honey off, and we have to just as soon feed them, put that extra box on, pull up a frame of eggs or young larvae up into the top box, and we are going to feed. And it may take 8 gallons of feed, 10 gallons of feed to get where we want. A lot of times if you really push the feed and you watch it, a good queen will get you 2 deep boxes before the population gets so low they don't want to draw as well. And so that's a really nice split for multiple reasons. Okay, wait, it's not a split. That's drawing comb. Now that we've drawn the comb out, derailed myself. We are going to chop that in half. No, it's never happened before. First time ever seen on television. You chop that in half once they've drawn that comb out. Now you can take that and do half and half, and put one on one stand over here, leave one in the original stand, and just put a new queen that you either purchased or a queen cell, whatever, into that new box. And if you have 40 hives, well, goodness, now you've got 80 possibly.
Yeah.
And if we're doing queen cells, then we're going to probably do an extra 30 to 50%. So let's say I have 40 colonies, break them in half. Now I've got 80. We're going to take some of those extra bees, because they're strong single splits, very strong. We're going to take a little bit from each of those and make some mating nukes, very similar to the split that I just talked about earlier, a smaller split. We'll drop queen cells in those because we never get 100% takes. But we want to get that 40. And so those mating nukes will have probably 75% take. The deep boxes will have 75% take. And then by the time it's all said and done, now I've got 80 powerful colonies that are ready to go through the year. So that's my two favorite types of splits. There's a couple other ways to split bees. The other one would be like a shook swarm. And we could go into a colony right now. Let's say you're really not into selling nukes, but you want to prevent swarming. If you're in Tennessee, we're fixing to hit our autumn olive flow, and it causes our bees to swarm a lot because it's typically really good. And there's a lot of pollen coming in too. So we are going to shake 3 to 4 pounds of bees out of our strong colony, and that's going to really make them feel like they've swarmed, but you still have all this brood left in the original. And now we could purchase a queen. We're basically making our own package here. But the nice thing is, you use 1 round of oxalic acid vapor at the right time with that. And this new split that you've made is starting at the perfect time of the year to start a colony, because you have the whole honey flow ahead of you. So it's very easy to get that to draw comb out and to get going. Plus, you've just crushed the mites if you treat them with oxalic acid vapor or a gentle treatment that will kill the mites. And now you got a new queen and everything. You got the whole perfect season ahead of you. A shook swarm split like that, or making your own package, is another wonderful split to do.
Huh. I've actually never heard anyone talk about it doing it that way. I've heard of, like, I think it's called a Nasanoff split, where you shake all the bees and the queen. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about? It sounded like you were buying another queen, because the Nasanoff split is you shake all the bees out, and then the foragers fly back, and the new queen is in your new hive, so you artificially swarm them. So it's kind of somewhat similar to that, not exactly the same thing.
It is somewhat similar. So you're talking, you take the original queen and you shake the bees into a new location. So you've basically done something similar, and then you just let the original hive make their own queen.
They already have the queen cells, so that's like if they're on the verge of swarming.
I see.
Yeah.
That may work if you split them aggressively enough. Sometimes if they'll still
virgin.
Yeah, you'll have a virgin swarm. I hate swarming so bad. We're gonna segue one more time, and in cases like that where I have capped queen cells, I hate swarming so much. Oh, here we go. We are just going to crush every one of those cells if we don't need any more queens. If someone wants to make splits and wants more, those cells can be awesome to grow your apiary, because they were raised in the most perfect of conditions, which is swarming conditions. And you can make those splits, but I'm like, dang it, I don't need any more bees. I'm going to try to keep this hive together. First of all, I've got to find that queen. If you can't find the original, yeah, you've got to find it. The problem is it's like 60,000 bees. It's swarm season. And so we've got to find her. But if we can do that, and then we can take that shook swarm or whatever and put it over into here. And now I'm going to crush every single cell in there if I don't want any more splits. And then I'm going to come back about 5 days later, and I'm going to crush those again, because they're going to keep trying. And eventually the brood's going to get so old, they're hopelessly queenless. But you got to come back and make sure you crush these things. And so eventually they freak out, and the stimuli of swarming's gone, and they're just like, oh my goodness, we're all going to die here. We have no queen. We have no way to make one. But we've got this original queen over here. We can paper combine that later, or plug that in and fix that. Or you could just purchase another queen for that one. But that's if I'm really wanting to keep a colony from swarming. Best to never let it to get to that point, but It's beekeeping. Of course it happens.
Yeah, it's you know, I think it's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or something to that effect.
Yeah. I
And
hate that
that's
saying because my dad said it to me all the time, but it's so right. It's not even funny.
yeah, that often says. I mean, look at Cayman's face in that photo. It really says it all right there. You know,
Here
it's
we
just
go
pure
again.
pure misery. He sent me another cool one. This was actually in one of his videos. I believe he had a queen in his pocket in a queen cage,
Yeah.
and the hive decided to swarm onto him. They were in love with him, so I think he enjoyed that day, right?
Oh, well, it took me about 15 minutes to take my pants off, and I was talking to God very adamantly and seriously and directly about what I wanted at that moment, and it was a lot to ask for, but there was a lot
Pulled
of
it off.
bees in my britches. Yeah, I pulled it off literally. And so I want to say thanks to everybody for coming on and supporting your channel. I'm proud to see you making videos and all that stuff. And thanks for having me on. It's good to see so many of my friends. Thanks for coming on here and hanging out with us today. I just figured out where the option was to see all the comments.
Oh,
So a lot of nice folks over in here. Several of them
yeah,
helped me with the conference just like you did, and that was a lot of fun.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to. There's a thank you here. Steinthal Valley Honey, thank you for the $20 super chat. Make sure any questions you have, guys, drop them in the chat, and Cayman and I will get to them at some point. Happy to talk anything related to spring beekeeping, especially. So now we're getting into the splitting season, but about a month ago you were probably feeding pollen patties, right? And some spot sugar feeding.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
how do you do that feeding during the spring? I feel like this is one of the most important things that I've learned from your videos.
Oh, well, thank you. There was a time where I did not feed well at all, and it really made it difficult to do a lot of the splitting and stuff that I'm talking about. And years vary. This has been one of the lowest pollen patty feeding late winters, early springs that I've had in multiple years. We've just had so many wonderful flying days. I don't know since mid-February, early to mid-February, we haven't had at least a couple flying days, good flying days every week. It's been great, and so they're going out and getting pollen at least a couple times every week, and so that makes it to where the pollen patties just don't have as much value. It's not that they can't be a little helpful, but some years, you might get a stretch of 10 to 14 days in February and March where you may not get that. And if that happens one time, it can really set your bees back. Speaking of those queens that are coming back right now, I was looking in them today, and we were putting jar feeders on top of them, and they've taken a quart almost in like the last 5 hours. It's insane.
I've had that happen.
Maybe
Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah, just chugging, and they're not that big. They're like 3 frames worth of bees, but they're
Yeah.
hungry. I was just looking in there, and they had good pollen, but they just didn't have that. And I told my kids and Laurel, I'm just like, if these bees don't get any food and we have bad weather for 5 days, we're going to lose half of them. They look really good though, but it's just feeding, especially for little colonies, a little bit can go a long way, but also can swarm them out. So feeding is something that you have to actively be getting into your hives to know what's going on. And so don't get into your biggest and best colonies always too. I usually like to find something mid-range in strength, because there's always a couple that are just super awesome. And so those are terrible ones to gauge. And your weakest sickly ones, they're terrible to gauge too, because they don't forage properly. Find a couple average hives and just see what they look like stores wise, and do that every week. And I mean, heck, you can check 3 to 4 colonies in a yard in 10
Gives
minutes.
you a good sense.
12,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
12
less
minutes,
than that.
get
Like,
a good sense.
yeah. My spring inspections, even when I'm going through like almost every frame, I can still do it in like 5 minutes or so. It's as long as you're smart and you know what you're doing, like you can, get through it really fast. And one of the things that you also really stress with a lot of your feeding video is, don't just do it because someone told you to do it. Do it when you see stimuli in the hive that's how you make your decision. So if you like one, I think your golden rules that is really helpful for new beekeepers is, if a hive has less than 3 frames of honey, you need to be feeding them till they have those 3 frames, and until they get a significant amount of food coming in, and then that having that ring of honey above the frame is one of those just clear cut important things that you need to see in every hive.
Yeah, you just said it right there. I was fixing to say the 3 deep frames, and also having that. That's what we were seeing today as we were going through. I'm like, ooh, this is a really nice brood pattern. These queens have about that much young larvae, and they just haven't capped any of it yet. So I'm like, this is perfect for treatment. But I was like, man, there is not a pound and a half of honey in any of these splits here. Mm. These things have got to be fed today. So we dropped everything and did it.
Yeah. Here's the picture on the right with the pollen patty. I don't know if you've found this, but when I'm splitting in nukes, like if I have just some queen castles that I've been using for mating nukes, and I'll put in 1 frame of capped brood and 2 frames of foundation and feed them, or 1 frame of capped brood, 1 frame of honey. And I can never explain it, but they will have 1 full frame of food, or 1 full frame of brood, and then 2 half frames of brood, and they have like 4,000 bees in there, and they draw out a ton of comb, and it just, I can't pull any bees from them. I can't pull any brood from them, because if I do, it gets chilled, and I can't leave them that way. Otherwise, they're going to have 20,000 or 15,000 bees in a 3-frame mating nuke, which is just terrible for any amount of efficiency. So it's amazing what those small colonies can do. Yeah, I have trouble even believing it. Like, it is truly one of the most magical things for me to see. Look into those hives and see those just 1 frame of brood in that brand new queen. The hive's killing it. She's filling it up. They're drawing comb. It's just an awesome thing to see. Yeah.
When you're in the peak part of the season and you have a fresh queen and there's no maladies in the colony, they just take off like a rocket, and it's a very addictive thing. Every year you look forward to, and that's part of the reason beekeeping's so special to all of us. There's a few wackadoodles out there like Zach Heinzelman in Hawaii, and he gets like 3 primary flows a year, and that's if he's not trying.
That's cheating.
It is cheating, and he knows it, and he's really smug about it too. It makes me happy watching him having to bust his back pulling all those deeps of honey. But the rest of us, why it's so special, is it's 1 shot a year for a lot of us. You get a very short window. For me, about 8 weeks of nectar flow, maybe 10 in a wonderful year. And you've got to make hay while the sun's shining, and so do the bees. And during that period, the bees can grow so quickly, and raising your own queens is quite a bit of fun. So you had a picture of the pollen patties right there, and I'll just say that there's a difference on size of colonies too. On the little bitty colonies that we're trying to build up for selling nukes and things in the future, they're going to get a pollen patty. It doesn't matter if there's a good flow going on, because they're weaker. They can't devote as many bees to it. They're just not as strong. So they're going to get a very thin strip of pollen patty. It may only be a 1/4 pound per colony. That's actually pretty standard. So I'll do about a 1/4 pound for those. But we just want those little guys to go forward. So this is that early split. This is probably looking around 2.5 to 3 frames of bees. Yep. And so we're going to take that 1/4 pound. It's going to be about that big, and I'm going to cut it in half. A lot of surface area. The nice thing about the Jester nuke boxes is they're raised about that high off of the frames, so the bees can really cover that and protect it from small hive beetles primarily, and also just consume it faster. So the bigger colonies, though, it would be a complete waste to throw one in right now. They were just bringing in buckets of in buckets. So just keep in mind that not all colonies need the same thing at the same time.
Exactly. And you also, this is one of your tricks from your videos, is to cut up the pollen patties to give the bees more surface area. So that will allow them to deal with the beetles better.
Yes, 100%. And a little bit of killing beetles is one of my favorite things to do, as far as, like, I love to kill varroa mites, but it's not as satisfying because
you don't get the crunch. Yeah,
you don't get the crunch, and you can't really smack them with the hive tool without a lot of times taking out a bee. So that just takes all the fun out of it. These guys, it's different. Someone needs to get like I know varroa mites will be hard, and we joke about getting a vaporizer for those, but it would be cool to have a vaporizer laser for small hive beetles. So all jokes aside, this is a great time in Tennessee to be killing those small hive beetles. This is a question I just got asked recently, what to do about those guys. And every creature has times in the year where it's vulnerable. This is a vulnerable time for those of us in Tennessee. Now, if you're in Georgia and places deep in the South, you already missed your chance. That was probably in January for you guys. However, the ground's still really cold. We're getting some cold weather. They really can't reproduce well, and they're hungry. And so you can put in some traps for them, and what you're killing now really helps get rid of them later in the season. Now, you'll never get rid of all of them. And here's the thing. If one hive collapses, it only takes a handful of beetles to collapse a hive. They lay so many eggs. The main thing is to never let that develop. When you see a hive heading downhill, just go ahead and shake them out, combine it back, protect those combs. Don't let the beetles take over, because one slime out, there's 6,000 to 10,000 more small hive beetle larvae going into the ground to pupate, and they're going to be visiting your colonies within the next, like 6 to 12 weeks or something like that. So all it takes is one, and fun time. So people up in Maine, they don't understand what us real beekeepers have to go through.
Your ground is cold? Okay, Cayman, sure. It was 18 last night, and I think it'll be colder tonight, and we're getting like 3 inches of snow tomorrow.
Well, living up north is a choice. Deal with it.
Yeah. I mean,
except you're a kid, you're a young kid though, so you don't have a choice right now. You have to stick it out there. But it sounds like there may be some options coming up in the future.
Yeah. Here's a question from Jennifer Apiary. When will the pictures by the photographer be posted? Is that happening, or?
So actually, there's several things happening behind the scenes on the website. Chris Medeiros is working on the website and getting pictures, and the wizard. So we've got a lot of that kind of stuff. The announcement for the dates will be coming up soon. I will say we're kind of getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but that's okay. The pictures will be coming soon. We're kind of going through them because there was thousands taken, and we just don't want to dump a bunch of photos. We really want to go through them and have just a bunch of really respectable, good photos. And
all right,
look professional.
Yeah. I'll forward it on my YouTube channel and whatnot whenever you get it posted. Glad to see yeah, of course. Whatever you need, Cayman. Glad to see feeding addressed. Yeah, it's one of those, not every colony needs it, and they don't need it all year. But when you're intentional and you know what to look for, you can see great change with a fairly small amount of work. And I think that's the bonus of it. If you can put in a little bit of work and make a large difference. Bruce here. Congrats on 1K, Rainier. Thank you. Good to see you, Cayman. Yeah, good to see him. I gotta make fun of his height at some point, so this will be a good time to do so.
Okay.
Sting that like button for Cayman's Superman shirt. So it's looking good tonight, Cayman. You're looking
Thanks.
Good. Yeah.
I've been getting Superman shirts since I was a kid. I don't wear them a lot on lives because they just don't look as professional. However, this is what I was working in today. We had a rainstorm blow through while we were planting onions, and so I needed a long sleeve shirt, and I don't have a lot of long sleeve shirts that aren't like jackets or hoodies or something like that, and so I grabbed this one and Supermaned my way through planting the rest of the onions with my wife, and wow. Here we are.
That sounds pretty Superman-y. We got a comment here. Question. We got Caleb Long from Pennsylvania. How many frames of brood do you leave in the parent hive in order to make honey?
That's a great question. So it depends on what kind of split that you're doing, right? And our honey flow's coming up here in about a week to 10 days. And so if we're wanting to do single brood management, I'm going to cut them back to about 4 like brick frames of broods. I mean, we're just talking solid patterns on all 4 frames. Or I'm going to put 5 frames of brood in there. And I run 10 frames in my brood chambers. So that means 5 are going somewhere else. Well, they're all double deeps right now. So I'm probably going to have 8 to 10 frames of brood, with brood on it. Doesn't mean they're all solid. So 3 to 5 are going over here, 5 stay. But the magic number for me is 4 to 5 frames stay in the honey production colony. All the forager bees stay in that colony as well.
How many weeks before?
Like the week before.
The week before the flow, and you're backfilling it all with drawn comb, right, in the bottom?
Yes. Foundation will not work for this.
I think you'd probably want 7 at least, and it would be a swarming issue if you didn't have a drawn super to put on top. Like if you had 7, if you had 6 or 7 frames of brood, a few foundations, and then you had drawn super comb. I mean, it wouldn't be perfect, but I think it would be an option if you don't have a lot of backlog drawn comb. Not everybody has hundreds of drawn frames to pull through like you do.
I didn't used to, and it's one of the most important things beekeepers need to get is extra drawn combs, and that's why after the flow's over, we focus on trying to get every production colony to draw at least 10 frames of brood combs, deep combs for me. And so that really helps a lot right there, because heck, you got 100 hives, that's 1,000 more combs right there for next year.
Yeah.
So that's why maybe for trying to get a split and make your honey too, Caleb, a shook swarm would be better for you. And so you're going in there and like, okay, our flow's starting, and maybe you have to talk to somebody locally. This is why I think that beekeepers who really want to get serious and dialed in need to also study the plants. It doesn't have to be all the plants, but the critical ones. The first major flow, the big surges of flow. So for us, autumn olive in our best bee yards is the first one. Then we are going to really hit surges possibly of black locust. It's a hit or miss one. Now, blackberry blossom is usually pretty consistent. And so these first surges are swarm madness time of the year. If we can make it through the first couple surges and the bees start drawing and pushing that honey up and get in their mind to do that, as long as they don't run out of room and the nectar gets pushed into the brood nest, we usually don't deal with very much swarming. And what we're trying to do is get past that stimuli. It's very natural that the bees need to want to reproduce, but we just don't want them to do that by leaving our hive. So a shook swarm may be best. You're pulling a bunch of bees away, shaking them over here. You're leaving all of the adult bees in the original location. Even if you shake them in, they'll fly back. You're taking 3 to 4 pounds of bees. You're probably talking somewhere around shaking 8 to 9 deep frames to get that 3 pound. It just depends on how many bees there are on there. And that can be really easy to do. You can, if you like to have a double deep hive, shake all the bees into the bottom box, put an excluder on, put put the second box on top, let the bees work their way through, and now you can just shake that or however you want to do that. But basically, making your own package or making a shook swarm, that allows you to cut the bees back, but that's not going to lose much honey crop from the original colony at all while inhibiting their desire to swarm. You get another hive of bees, and that works pretty darn good. You still have to check for swarm cells every now and then. So there's no perfect way. If it's a really good hive, they'll probably think about it again. If they don't, especially if they don't have room to lay and they don't have room to put all that nectar.
Yeah, I'm shocked that I haven't heard you say this before. I really can't remember you talking about this, but it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think the analogy would be taking the cream off the top. You're not making them draw any more comb, and so you're just setting them back just barely enough to keep them under that swarm line, but you're not really decreasing much of their honey potential. You're really keep maximizing the amount of honey you can get, whilst also pulling that a little bit extra off the top to just inhibit a little bit more swarming.
Absolutely, and you're going to get more combs drawn too because of that new split that you made. So it's the easiest time of the year to make splits and increase. Don't try to do it, all of your splitting, when it's really hard in July and August in Tennessee. Sometimes we got to also realize that there's times of the year where things are easier, and let's capitalize on that as much as possible. So I don't worry about trying to push it. Let's see if we get 125 pound averages this year. Nah, let's be okay with 90 to 100 pounds. If it's, then that's a good year. And we're also going to have our split over here we can sell to Billy Bob, or we can just keep it for ourselves.
Absolutely. You got to give Billy Bob those splits, you know?
Yeah, he killed him. He didn't feed his bees.
Yeah.
Or
DC is not feeling very kind tonight. He said, I think Cayman should grow facial hair. It makes him look older.
You know, I had a goatee on my way up to Wisconsin here recently, and I hadn't shaved in probably 3 to 4 weeks, which is very unlike me. I've just been very busy lately, and I can't. My brother Ethan has been able to grow a beard thicker than what I can grow now since he was like 15 or 16, and so it just always kind of demoralized me. And my wife isn't like a mega beard person, and so she's not super excited about it either. So I just stay in my lane. That's what I do.
Yeah. Keith Spillman of Half Track and Honeybees. Cayman, do you have any supers on yet?
Hey Keith, good to see you. So, no, I don't. We will be putting those on within the next 7 days, I would say. I'm looking at the autumn olive. I went through a couple yards yesterday and was looking at the autumn olive blooms. They haven't even begun to open up yet. And even once they begin, it'll take a few days before that opens. I'm going to be maneuvering a few things between now and then, but I will be putting supers on probably in the next 7 to 10 days.
All right. Yeah, I've got my supers on.
Tight.
All my hives are supered and rearing to go. Yeah, it's really prime time here in Maine. We're getting to I think like 15 tonight, and like I said, 4 inches of snow tomorrow. It's a beautiful time,
Yeah,
and plenty of, and mud at the same time. So it's really the trifecta,
Well, that's why you have lobsters up there.
Yeah, I guess it's worth it, I suppose.
Y'all are just a bunch of nerds. You want to talk about the pot calling the kettle black? Chris, you're the biggest nerd that I know. And in several ways, not just beekeeping. Computer nerd, hoodie nerd, merch nerd, analytic nerd. Yeah, logo nerd, absolutely. Just a big nerd.
We got Bruce's bees here. Beetles are a nightmare, can't stand them. I've declared war on them this year for sure. Yeah, Bruce had a lot of losses in one yard. He had a ton of beetles. Yeah, I'm glad I don't really have to mess with it. Great video. Awesome to hear the bee chat. Yeah, I'm happy to have Cayman on. He's doing pretty well, I think. Decent.
This is my first time.
It's your first time. I don't know if you've ever been on a live chat before. It's truly something special. We got Castle Hives here. Congrats on 1K. Keep up the great work. Yeah. Hey Brian. I hope you're doing well there in Ohio. I think I saw something from their chat, and he has similar weather to I do right now. So suffice to say, not great. So Cayman, since you're the experimenter, have you used any better comb yet? Do you have any plans to get to that point?
Does it look like I've tried a better comb? I don't think so.
No. Okay.
All jokes aside, I have not tried it. I've had several good friends that I trust who have used it, and it seems that at first there's a slight bit of reluctance, just a slight bit, to the queen laying in it. But it doesn't take very long, and then they will lay brood in it. It needs to be wired, and I believe that you can purchase it wired. And now, Frederick Dunn did a video on this, and Dansky's Bees also did a review on it that was good. The main thing in hot weather, if it doesn't have the wiring, it sags really bad. And this is pretty uniform. So it can be melted and used for things, but it can't be sold as beeswax. And but the cost is the main problem, I think, with it. But I've seen pictures of brood from Dan that looked really good. So I haven't heard any updates in like the last 2 years, but I'm not sure there's anything to add.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. People have asked me about it at my local bee school and if it works or not. And I told them that I hadn't really had any experience, but I'd heard some relatively good things about it. It's not perfect from what I understand, but it's, moving in the right direction. It's cool that that's even an option at this point. So We have Homer Spring here. Have you started grafting yet, Cayman? Yeah, so this kind of segues into our your queen rearing. So I know that's an integral part to your beekeeping. Can you talk about your queen rearing? And you have started grafting, right?
Yeah, and it's fun because, well, getting to select from the best colony or best colonies in your operation is neat. You kind of hope for the best and get to see the daughters, and also just going through the entire process now. That's what's really fun about it, is instead of purchasing a nuke or something else or catching a swarm, we're really there the entire process. We're raising the queens, and we do raise queens in March here in Tennessee, typically third or fourth week. In a warm year, maybe the second week. Then we're making the splits. We're shaking from our own bees. We're dropping the queen cells. We grafted the larva originally, and then she's going to come back, and we're going to feed them, and we're going to take care of those darn mites, and we are going to just do everything that we can to get them through that winter. And then next year they'll be our honey production colonies and the colonies that we're selling nucleus colonies off of. So queen rearing really gives you a lot of control, in my opinion. It gives you a lot of ability to save money too, because I don't know what queens are right now. I haven't purchased a lot of queens here lately, like
but 45-ish, I'd say, around that. 30, probably if you're in the South where they're widely available, probably more like 30, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you can still get some queens, but there's quality queens, and then there's poor quality. And
yeah,
I have in the past purchased cheap queens, and boy, that is expensive. So
yeah,
you definitely need to have good ones. And I never really had good results with very many people that I purchased queens from. And I think it's partially their fault, but it's also partially not their fault. There's a lot of shipping variables there, and there's also the fact that the queen is put in a cage. That's the cool thing about working with your own queen cells, is a lot of these queens, they'll go into a starter, they'll be grafted, then I'll put them in as a cell, they'll go on their mating flight, but they never see a queen cage ever. And they never stop laying until they want to stop laying. And so they're not going through an unnatural, stressful period of us plugging them into a cage and shipping them off somewhere. Bees are extremely social, and so these things do have an impact to them. And they also need to be able to lay for a long period of time. And the commercial guys, especially, what you have to consider, I went to the almonds this year, which was awesome, by the way. And yeah, it was really cool. I've never been. And so, I mean, it's just a sea of almond trees, and there's just bees everywhere. But there's this massive demand now of like 1 million something or more queens, and not everybody raises their own queens. And so a lot of these hives are going to be ready to split as soon as they get back. And if they only get broke down in half, that's probably 1.5 to 2 million queens needed, just right out of the gate. A lot of people wonder, why can't I get equipment? Why can't I get queens? Why can't I get this? There's a massive demand right after the almonds for queens, and these orders were put in 4 to 6 months ago. They have relationships going back decades, some of them. They have feeder needs, they have box needs, and so my opinion, if you're wanting to buy equipment, you really need to, for the next season, start in December or at the Bee Expo. Shameless plug.
That's what you're master at.
Yeah, the shameless plugs, that's right. And so that being said, these commercial fellas, they suck a lot of the demand and the availability with all the demand that they have. And so it makes it difficult to get stuff. And because of that, quality, in my opinion, goes down. I've visited a lot of operations that sell queens, tens and tens of thousands of them. And I'm not trying to be mean, but a lot of them have H2A workers who may or may not, even if it wasn't H2A workers, if it's just a bunch of high schoolers or local good old boys, they don't care that much about bees compared to the owners a lot of times.
Yeah, they're no Kamon Reynolds,
No, definitely not. They're some of them taller than me, but
definitely. Yeah.
That's what's nice about the H2A workers. Most of them are not, but it depends on which part of the world they're from. That being said, the quality not only is in the handling of it, how old the larva that they graft, How long have they been banked? How long have they had a chance to lay? This is a big problem. Once you start raising your own queens or get queen cells from somebody else, you really get a lot of control back there. And the two most important things that helped me make money in bees was killing mites properly and never letting them get high enough to impact the bees. And then the next thing would be raising my own queens. I mean, you can once you learn how to do it, it's not that hard, and it costs, I don't know, 30 cents a queen, 40 cents a queen, if you don't count your labor. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah, that's not worth anything. Yeah,
it's not worth anything. So, there's Mr. Bruce and
Mr. Bruce, yes. He's got the cell builder ready, going to graft tomorrow, trying to get it figured out. May do a video later in the year, but probably not this time. Yeah, I remember the first time grafting. I certainly wouldn't want it videoed either. So I can understand that idea.
Yeah. If we had the videos of me when I grafted the first time, I'd be laughed probably off of YouTube. I can't remember how old I was. I think around 19, 20, somewhere in there, and it was just absolute disaster. Yeah. Teenagers don't know anything.
14, not to brag though.
14? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, whatever.
Okay. To be fair, my first attempt I did fail, but my second attempt in 2021, I did successfully do it. So, depends on how you count it. But we got Steve Amos here. Glad to see him on here. Ashby sent me some great pictures of cells today. Great takes. Yeah, Ashby Miller in North Carolina. He grafted like 400 this week. I think they've been doing it a couple of years. Yeah, Ashby did a great interview with Bruce, and he, stressed the idea that just go out there and fail with grafting. It's fine. Everybody, is not perfect on their first try, but if you're able to dial it in, it saves you so much heartache during the summer. Like, to have a young, vibrant queen is just one of the most important things you can do for your hives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It was good to see you, Steve, on here. Thanks for helping out at the conference. Yeah, 2025 Bee Expo. Keith knows what it's about. He's one of our hardest core members that we have. He's been around forever. It's just so weird.
The first 1,000 subscribers,
Yeah, but you were a kid, so I never heard anything from you. So the adults were talking back then. What were you, like 15 years old, something like that? 14?
14 or 13, yeah.
I appreciate you. I do. It's crazy how we're having these conversations, because to me it's been such a blur, because I was truck driving full-time and then eventually part-time being working 13.5-hour days for 3 days and then doing bees the other 4. And
sounds really part-time, yeah.
Yeah, it was really part-time, and there's a 3-hour commute too. But it was the only job I could find that would kind of work, and so then going into the YouTube and then the conference thing actually worked when Laurel said, hey, let's do that. And I'm just like, this will never work. And here we are. It's really weird that, guys like Keith and you and so many other people I've known for 5+ years now. And it doesn't seem like it's been that long. It's been a wild ride. This last year was the wildest of them all.
Yeah, for sure. It was good seeing you came in at Beak Meet Wazoo, right? Is that how you say it? Go for it.
Yeah, Beak Meet Wazoo. That's difficult. Say that 5 times. Beak Meet Wazoo.
I couldn't even say it one time.
It's Wausau, actually.
Okay. I couldn't remember. I saw some stuff about it, but
that was a really fun conference to go to. I enjoyed that quite a bit. Of course, the stream team guys were there. Dr. David Peck was there, and Hilco and Thorn Manufacturing is built there in Wausau, which was one of the reasons I wanted to go up there so bad, is so we could see their operation, what they're doing, and tell Jed all the things he's doing wrong and what he needs to build better, and
perfect,
all of those things. And so, he's another homeschooler. He's younger than me too, so he just needs a lot of correction from someone who's mature and wise.
Oh, it's so mature, yeah. Yeah. Real mature, yeah. What method are you using for your cell builders this year?
The same one that I've been using since I started, and that's a starter finisher. There's a book by Dr. Larry Connor that goes through multiple different setups, but he talks about starter finishers and variations therein. And I've got some videos on it as well, but I really like to just start them in a queenless starter and get the cells started, and then you can take a day later, take them out and put them into a finisher. And that can be a queen right colony with a queen in the bottom box, a queen excluder, and this needs to be a very powerful colony. We want it close to swarming. And I can put multiple bars up in there, 45 on each, this time of the year when it's ideal conditions. Now for those, we always have pollen patties. I don't care if it's the best flow on earth. There's pollen patties in there. Bee bred up against those grafts, and we are going to have the frame, the other frame next to them is going to be eggs, or a young larvae would be ideal because that draws a lot of nurse bees to that region. And then there's bee bread right there, and they're just going to feed those grafts really good. And so that's a queenless starter and then a queen right finisher. And that's what we use for all of our large scale queen rearing. I do a lot of videos and talks on just the starter finisher, which is the 5-frame nuke box. And that's good for raising a couple dozen queens. And it works really good for that. So for most people, about 7 frames of bees in a 5-frame nuke. Just shake a bunch of bees in there, a couple frames of bee bread, give them some sugar syrup feed and some pollen patty, and graft in there, and whammo.
You can get all the queens you need for the year and all your buddies as well at the same time.
Yes,
done right there.
And tell those commercial guys to keep those queens in southern Georgia.
Beekeeping with Natalie. Oh, hey, who's the old guy on the right?
The youth of today.
Yeah, Natalie, I'm surprised she didn't go for the height attack. That's mainly where she stays in her lane with that, but I feel like it's good that she's branching out. Steve Amos here, hashtag Laurel's always right. I concur on that hashtag.
Yeah. My uncle gave me like a whole sheet of different things about being married and kind of some rules of engagement. Some of them were as simple as, make sure that you leave the toilet seat down. And then some of them were like, repeat after me, honey, I was sorry, you were right, and I was wrong. And it seems the older I get, the more important this cheat sheet is.
Copy and paste right in there, yep.
Right.
Perfect. We got Steve Amos, poor Cayman. Also, hey, Natalie, just watched your videos from Navi. I thought those two things were related, because if anybody's seen the recordings, I don't know how much they cut out of it. Hopefully some, but it wasn't pretty. She really went hard. She actually, the original roast did get edited out by the camera crew. I'm actually requesting to get that so we can utilize that for future blackmail. Not that she'll care, but it was essentially like I introduced Natalie, which was my request. It's like the only thing I asked for. It's like, can I introduce you? And she's like, as long as you don't, goober it up, which was difficult, but I didn't. I did a respectable, professional job. And the first thing she's like, all right, that's enough, Cayman. Stop talking. Go get me a muffin or something. And what can I say? I've kind of done this to myself. I haven't necessarily played nice for the last 4 or 5 years, so now it's payback time for Natalie, I think. Yeah, I mean, if you can't take it, don't dish it out. So that's right. That's kind of my takeaway from that. She certainly did not hold back, and that was pretty good foreshadowing for the rest of the speech. Cayman, it's so good to see you streaming again. I'm happy to have him on here. He's talking bees as he always does. I don't know if he's ever stopped talking bees, if I'm being completely honest with all of you.
Hey, Brian, I'm just going to comment on that real fast. It's good to see you, Brian, and for those of you who haven't seen any YouTube videos in a while and live streams, they will be coming soon. I don't know if that'll be next week on my channel or if that'll be a month. There's been a lot of crazy stuff go on in the last year, and some of it's been out of my control, but there's just more butt that needs kicking sometimes, and I think the expo said everything that Laurel and I felt like saying.
We got Brian J. Mad Air. Chinese grafting tools seem like the most popular right now. Do you still use the German at all? I use all Chinese. I don't like the German tool.
It just hurts to say Chinese, even if it is good.
Well, only like 1 out of 10 of them actually work, but
Thank you.
yeah,
I needed that.
yeah.
So I actually use the master grafting tool now, which is basically like the
Whoa.
China. Yeah, exactly. So it is really nice. It's made by Pierce, and they'll bring them to the expo, and I'll absolutely love them because you can. It's got a better angle than the Chinese grafting tool. It actually works every time, unlike the Chinese grafting tools. I kind of did the math at some point. I'm like, and I do a lot of grafting, so I wear them out over a few years. And as much grafting as I do, it's easy to justify an American-made Pierce grafting tool, but it's more precise. You can see better into the cell. It comes with an extra tongue, and it's made to last. So I absolutely love it, and it works better than the Chinese grafting tool. But the Chinese grafting tool works really well as long as you have a good working one.
Yep.
And there are some guys who actually have talked about different ways that you can make them better and take a Chinese grafting tool and kind of keep working it and keep it in shape so you have the same one for long periods, like change out the tongues. Ain't nobody got time for that. That's the way I look at it. I want a tool.
Are you a rap artist?
I am not. But there was that woman that went viral years ago when her house burnt down, and it was absolutely hilarious, and so I loved it. So I use it all the time. But no, the Chinese grafting tool, we've used it a bunch. I don't use the German hardly anymore. The master grafting tool is the best tool on the market, and but it is a little bit more. So if you're going to be doing a lot of grafting, I definitely think it's a great tool. But heck, some of the guys that make 10 to 20,000 queens a year, they custom make their own hive tool or grafting tools, and it's like some piece of wire and a couple strands of this, and they're making money with it. So
Yeah. Yep. There's 33 hours of Expo videos, so everybody's got to get on that. Infinite information there. We got Dave Dwire with the $5 super sticker. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
good to see you, Dave.
Dave Cayman will not be getting a commission, unfortunately, for him, but next time. There was a question
to my
about
agent.
Yeah, she hasn't done great negotiating with me lately, but we'll see. We'll see if we can get a deal worked out in the end. Okay, here was a question that I always had when I started with the starter finisher method. When using a queen right finisher, would it ever cause the hive to swarm when the cells are ripe? This is something I've always wondered, but I've never had it happen, so I've been assuming it doesn't normally.
If the hive is in swarm mode, absolutely. If the main queen is down there and she's just laying, and they're letting her lay, they may be like trying to draw stuff out in the beginnings of it, but they're not actually trying to make that queen down below stop laying. But if that queen in the bottom stops laying, or were in swarm mode, let's say that you took this colony is swarming, they've got capped queen cells and no queen, and you introduce a new one with a cage and try to get that, and they still have that in their system. Oh yeah, totally. I've seen this happen before, where your cells will emerge and it'll basically be a virgin swarm at that point. And a lot of times the first thing that will happen is a couple of them will go around and drink a little bit of nectar, and then sometimes they'll kill your queen too.
That's really fun.
Yeah, it's just like, come on guys, at least leave me with something here. But it can happen, but typically it's not a problem at all, because I'm picking a colony that has a awesome laying queen. I don't want to find like they're swarming out tomorrow type conditions.
Yep.
But if they're like starting to just barely draw some cells and put some royal jelly in it, I'm going to go through and crush all of those. Let that queen keep laying. That's perfect. Because they're going to raise
the Corey method right there.
Yeah, well, Corey's desperate, and he uses all the easiest cheats what he can do to get things done.
Yeah, I mean, you're always so complimentary of him. Here's another great question from Dave. Why use a starter finisher? Can't you just let them cap them in the starter? I think there's a good answer for this.
Yes, good question too. So it just depends on what you need. So if I have a 5-frame nuke as a starter or a 10-frame colony as a starter, Out of the 5-frame nuke, I'm going to graft 45 into it. Out of a 10-frame starter, these are queenless starters, I'm going to graft 90 in at a time. I'm going to come back a day later, and then I'm going to pull all those. I'm going to put it in a finisher. I'm going to graft right back into that same day. If I can get 80 takes out of 90 on the big side of it, on the big starter, and I do that for 10 days, that's 800 queen cells. And that's all out of one starter. And then I just have to have multiple finishers, which can be just strong double deep colonies in my yards. No problem to have 10 colonies to do that whatsoever. So it's really about scale is the reason you'd want to do that. But if you're just wanting a handful for yourself, well, that's probably just why. You just need a starter finisher. Just make sure if you have a colony that's going to start them and finish them, it's got to be super strong, super well fed. A lot of people get really nervous about the grafts, but typically where they go wrong is they don't have a strong enough young bee population. So you've got to move it to a new location so you know I have no old bees because all the old ones fly away. And then I want 7 frames of bees in a 5-frame nuke box, and I want so much nutrition it's almost coming out of their ears. And then after that, just make sure that your grafts just don't get dried out as you're grafting them. Have a warm, moist towel to keep them from drying out, and boom.
Yeah, just to reiterate though, if I think the question was specifically centered towards they'll swarm because they have the queen cells in there, and I think from what your answer was, unless they were creating cells before you started to graft into them, you've never had one, or mostly probably never had one, swarm because they had the grafted queen cells above and then the queen decided to take off below. Has that specifically happened, like for that reason, if they weren't starting cells before you grafted?
Oh, so that's the question before this one.
Yep.
Okay. I missed something.
So
reiterate that.
Here's what I wondered the first time I did this. You've started the colonies, you started the cells, and you've put the queen excluder on the bottom box. You have that second deep with bee bread in it, and you drop the graft frame in it. And so since they are building a bunch of queen cells because you're grafting in the top box, and the bottom box has a laying queen, have you ever had that laying queen in the bottom box take off because you grafted and there were a bunch of queen cells in the top?
No, not unless they were already in the swarm mode, and it could happen, because conditions change. If all of a sudden you get a massive honey flow and that it's backfilling down below, it's a problem. And so you may have to put a honey super on top or something. It just depends on the conditions. All of the guys that I know that raise tens of thousands of queens, they want a flow. They don't want a good honey flow, because good honey flows cause a lot of problems on cause a lot of problems on making nukes, getting queens mated, getting queens raised. When you just have so much nectar and it's stupid, it really causes a lot of problems during this process. So if we're talking like right now, I don't have to worry about that. I'm having a trickle of red bud and a few things come in, but nothing that's ever going to make it into a super. It's being consumed. But once you start getting to the point where there's times of the year, like a good blackberry blossom flow or a good autumn olive flow, the bees will put almost a medium super of honey in a week. And if you put scales on your hives, you'll notice that the lion's share of your honey does not come in over let's say your flow is 10 weeks. It's not coming in evenly over 10 weeks. It's probably like 4 to 5 copious weeks of nectar. And so that's going to be a tough period for trying to do these things and keep them from swarming. And it's not necessarily because you put the grafts in, it's just the conditions outside the hive.
Absolutely. We got Jeremy Lindsay here. Why does Cayman always have his Superman shirt on every time I see him? That is an important question.
Just because I can, I suppose.
Since Jeremy, helped with the conference, we have a question from him. Cayman, if I have a strong colony and I create a strong split, should I start it out in a 10-frame box?
I would this time of the year. I mean, if I'm making like a little 1 frame of brood and a shake of bees or 2, I'm not putting that in a 10-frame box. But if we're talking like it's a good strong 4 frames or bigger, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it in a bigger box because they'll be there. And our weather's pretty good right now. And so the main thing is just if we get some cold weather, make sure they have food contact. One of my friends went through this, and I just hated talking to him about it. It was like 30 colonies, and I had done this years before. And you make all these splits in March and April, and the weather doesn't cooperate, and you don't put a food frame in there, or they burn through it, and then you get a rough patch of weather, and they just starve. Wonderful bees, and they just starve. They burn through so much energy right now on these 30 and 40 degree nights trying to keep that brood at 90 degrees. They can go through frames of food very quickly. These splits out here, oh goodness, they've probably gone through, and they're not that big, 3 frames worth of honey, I'd say, at this point in the last 3 weeks. So
yeah, that's a lot of food. Yeah,
it's a lot of food. It's almost as if every bee was to put its head in a cell. There's probably less bees than there was honey. They've consumed a ton.
Okay, I think that's helpful. It's just an efficiency thing, mostly, and in a lot of ways, yes. So I wanted to hit on one last thing. So briefly, mention the Bee Expo. The elephant in the room per se. I got some pictures here from January. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Cayman, but there was about 2,500 ticket holders there, and altogether roughly like 2,800 or 3,000, right? Is that correct?
So just a little off, but close. We had we were a little under 2,800 total people there, as far as attendees. That doesn't include staff, doesn't include any of the vendors. So I didn't get the exact number, but it was a little over like 3,200 total people with vendors and everything like that. So it was a lot. It was a lot of people, and it was a lot of fun too. It almost feels as good as seeing a hive of bees take off that you started from start to finish. Almost. And the only reason it's not as good is because there's always a handful of weirdos. See, bees can't talk back. I guess these would be the bees that sting, that annoy you.
The foragers,
the foragers. Yeah. There's always a few of those in a conference, and most people hopefully never experience them. That's our goal, but Laurel and I do. But 98%, 99% of the people are just salt of the earth people, and that's why we chose beekeeping as our career. Is I was around these people as a teenager, and now get to be around them as an adult. And we just have so much fun. And they have so many interesting stories about the type of honey that they produce, the conditions that they have, different tools and techniques. I love it all. And so it's always so much fun. And right there's a lot going on in this picture. Mm-hmm. Several people that I know. And just make sure that you kind of white out Greg Burns on the left-hand side. And this is a beautiful picture. And there's a Natalie shirt right there, Beekeeping with Natalie.
Yep, right in the center.
Yeah. Center.
Yep. Well, you gotta plug the person that makes fun of you the most. I think that's pretty important. Part of my job as the proctor of the live stream.
Yeah, proctor of the live stream.
So Cayman, one of the most exciting parts, at least for me, being there and being around everyone, is there's a youth program. I didn't quite get the picture up, but I'm sure it's on the website or will be.
It will be.
Do you have any idea when the youth program will open, and can you explain to everybody what that is?
Yes. So the next Gen B program is targeting the next generation of leaders and the youth. And some of them maybe don't feel like that now, but I definitely didn't feel like that at 15 and 18 and 19. My goal was just to keep my bees alive and make some splits and stuff, and that's okay. I mean, some of them maybe don't even keep bees forever. We just don't know, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment. And one I've seen a lot of good things come out of over the years as we have engaged young people like yourself originally, and this year you were really more staff and help put up the whole thing, but just that. I mean, not as important as the youth program really anymore. You're not an honored guest. Yeah. You're slave labor. And
it happens. I mean, I'll take this demotion. I can live with it.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to deal with it. So these young guys and gals, we're looking at the ones that are primarily very active. And so we request they send a short YouTube video and maybe a short little essay about themselves, pictures, whatever they're doing in their community. It's really impressive to see what several of them are already doing. We want to be able to bring them in to the biggest show in North America and encourage them. Bob, Benny, and I sat down and we talked with them for about an hour and 20 minutes. We gave them bee suits. That was a new
Kettle
addition
corn.
this year. Kettle corn. That was a surprise. One of the other next gen
It was
people
good
brought
stuff.
that for
It was
everybody.
good
It was good stuff. It was a problem in our household who was getting the last bag. We had a fight over it. I'm
Yeah.
the meanest, so I got it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that being said, Bob and I, we did talk about bees when we fielded their questions about bees. We spent more time actually talking about, hey, these are the financial things to watch out for. This is kind of the personality traits that you're going to need to be successful, and just kind of adversity that Bob and I had went through. And then Bob Benny being the legend that he is, like I asked Bob, I'm like, when I was about their age, someone told me to get out of bees. There's no money in it. And another guy said that almost a year later, and said, Bob, is there money in beekeeping? He's like, there's like a little twinkle in his eye. Well, I probably shouldn't say this. Suzette would probably kill me, but I'm going to say it anyways. And he proceeds to say that he's got like several $1 million worth of assets and stuff in bees, and very impressive. It's not easy to do in beekeeping, but it can be done. And Bob definitely is the guy who I would talk to first before venturing into most things bees. He's seen a few things over the years, and he's a very kind person. So the Next Gen program is all about equipping the next generation. That it will open up. Applications will open up in the first day of July, and
Yep.
so anybody who's watching this, you see some young men and women out there. We want them 20 years. So if you're 21, you're too old, and down to I believe we went down
12,
to
I think.
12. And
Yep.
so some people get, you would not believe some of the parents that get so tore up over this because their child is 11. Life stinks. Imagine being as short as I am, but being a kid, and then wanting to go ride all the tall rides. It took me forever to get to earn some of those rides, okay? Life's not fair. Guys like Rainier will never understand. A bunch of tall people.
Yeah. So, to reiterate what Cayman said is, anybody anybody who's watching, find, through your club, people, just encourage them to apply so they can, see what it's like to be around these people and get advice from legends like Bob Binney, King Bob. We all know him, we all love him, and you'll get to talk to King Bob. And so I hope that everybody tries to reach out and find other young beekeepers to get them involved in this. I think it's a worthwhile program. Not that I've, been there or anything, but I enjoyed it. And I think that if we're able to, get those kids to make one YouTube video, I think they can really have a great time going.
Absolutely. And there was just several. There was a boy that was doing stuff in the almonds. Several of the girls were grafting or really engaging their local schools, and that's so critical to this industry. We want the average population of people knowing that honey is superior to other sweeteners, and bees are important, and weeds and other plants besides fescue is also important in your yard. And so education is crucial, and we need a lot of people to do it, and young people are the future. And so I remember Natalie, I hope she's still on, when she
Probably
came
not. She
to
doesn't
the,
like you very much.
no, she doesn't stick around. Better things to do. But at the first conference that Laurel and I put on, she was 11 years old, mostly just braces at that point, and didn't say hardly anything. Those were the days. How peaceful. And so her and her dad were there, and we had like 200 folks at the first conference, and just to see her development through YouTube and getting to see her at a lot of shows and the Bee Expo as well. that's what we're all about, is finding these guys and girls who are wanting to stick with the industry and become tomorrow's commercial bee breeders or educators, or maybe they're the person in the hometown that keeps 10 hives of bees, 12 hives, like the people that I met that got me into bees, and they inspired me to go on and be able to do some crazy things like I've done. And so the young people, you have to invest into them. But we also are very particular. Just because you're young, you don't get in. You got to actually be actively trying to keep bees and excited about it. So if you know anybody like that, send them our way. We want them at the next Bee Expo.
All right. Do you have anything else that you want to end on here before we completely wrap this up, Cayman? Anything else?
Yes, there's going to be some updates on the Bee Expo website. There's several things being worked on now. We're going to have when tickets come available. We're also going to have the dates even sooner than that. That should be released, I'm hoping, within the next week. I apologize it has taken this long, but we were working through several logistics for that. We're also going to have, of course, our next gen when to sign up for that and various other things. For those who are planning to come to the Bee Expo, I hope that you'll let folks know to go ahead and start practicing for the honey show. We had a massive honey show. We're very proud of that, but we want to be bigger than the guys in Europe. I mean, it's okay that they have a successful, great show, and I think it should be taken as a compliment from the honey show folks and us that we look at them as the target to hit, because they are basically the National Honey Show, the greatest thing out there. But how can we let people in Europe beat us here in the United States? That is not who we are. We can't let that happen. So
just ask them about the Revolutionary War,
They don't like to talk about it. They don't. And however, and here in Tennessee, we're going to continue being rebellious. So that being said, tell all your friends, bring stuff to the honey show. And I actually got to partake in my first black jar honey competition and be the judge with the stream team. And I sat back, stopped goofing off, and actually looked. I actually did. It was difficult because Greg was goofing off so much. It just I don't think I could have competed with him. And so I just decided to be the one person at the table who looked mature, respectful, and all that kind of stuff. And actually was quite a bit of fun to do that. But it was interesting how just between the four of us, Bruce and Brian and Greg and myself, some of our tastes for what our favorite was. Brian was like, "Oh, the dark honey, that's the stuff," and I'm like, "Get out of here, man!" It was a lot of fun. So,
yep.
Anyways, Rainier, I really enjoy your content. I try to pop in every few videos and see what you're up to next, and I'm looking forward to seeing how your season goes this year for you. And it sounds like there's some developments in the future for you. So, whenever you're going to announce that, let me know. I want to be a part of that. Everybody, I will see you in YouTube videos in the future, and there's going to be a lot more butt kicking to come. So if you like action, you like craziness, and you like bees, make sure to check out the Kamon Reynolds YouTube channel, because we'll be back before too long. And thanks, Rainier, for being a part of helping us be able to communicate with folks in the meantime, and also for producing good content. One of these days, Laurel may take me out for that one thing I shouldn't have said, and we may need you to fill in that gap desperately. So
I'll try my hardest. Thank you, everyone, for coming on tonight. I had a great time. Once the stream ends, just comment in the chat how your spring's going and how everything's progressing for you. Thank you so much for coming on here, Cayman, and everybody watching. Have a great night, and I will see you on the next stream or video. Good night, guys.
See you guys.